Welcome to the deep dive. We sift through your sources to pull out the essentials, basically giving you that shortcut to being really well informed. Today, we're looking at Texas, a huge state known for, well, extreme weather, but we're focusing specifically on its battle with flooding. It seems to be getting more frequent, more devastating. We've dug into the materials you sent over, and the goal here is to really unpack the core reasons why this keeps happening.
Yeah, and understanding Texas flooding, it's not just a local issue anymore.
Right.
What's happening there, these patterns, the recent events, it's kind of a crucial window into challenges lots of places are facing,
Yeah.
especially with rapid growth and climate shifts.
That broader picture is definitely key. So our mission today is pretty clear. It give you that shortcut, those key insights. Why does Texas flood so much? What's the history? What are the consequences? And importantly, what's being done? I think as we get into it, you might find some surprising connections. There's more to it than just rain. Okay, let's unpack this then. Where do we start? Maybe the ground itself?
Yeah, I think the foundation literally is Texas's geography and terrain. It's incredibly varied, right? You've got coastal plains, hill country, but the really critical part, especially in East Texas, is the soil. It's often this heavy, impermeable clay.
Impermeable clay, so like water doesn't soak in easily.
Exactly. Think of it like pouring water onto, I don't know, a paved parking lot, but across huge areas. When those heavy rains come down, the water just runs off super fast. It doesn't get absorbed. That sets the stage for flash floods almost immediately, even before you consider anything else.
Wow, okay, so the land itself is kind of preloaded for flooding, but then you add the weather on top of that, right? The big climate patterns. What do the sources say there?
Right, that's the next layer. Texas is perfectly positioned to pull in moisture from the Gulf of Mexico. It's right in the path of tropical storms, hurricanes, obviously. But it's not just the named storms. What's fascinating here is how bigger climate cycles, like El Nino and La Nina, affect things. They can really ramp up the rainfall, especially in spring and early summer. So you get this mix of local geology and these big global weather drivers.
Creating a perfect storm, sometimes literally.
Pretty much, sure.
And then, okay, you have the natural factors, the geology, the climate. Then we add people, urban development. Cities like Houston, Dallas, Austin, San Antonio, they've just exploded in size.
That's a massive factor.
All that growth means concrete and asphalt everywhere.
Right.
Roads, parking lots, buildings, rooftops. These hard surfaces, they don't absorb water at all. So even moderate rain just sheets off,
And it has nowhere to go except into the drainage systems.
which often can't handle it, right? Especially the steady bursts.
Exactly. They get overloaded incredibly quickly, leading to flash floods, even in areas you might not expect. It's like the cities are outgrowing their plumbing.
That leads right into the next point, doesn't it? The infrastructure itself.
It does. A lot of Texas's drainage systems, the levees, culverts, they were designed and built decades ago. They simply weren't engineered for the kind of rainfall intensity and volume we're seeing now.
Built for a different climate reality, essentially.
Right. And on top of that, you have historical zoning issues. Our sources point out how, for years, zoning laws often allowed building in known flood-prone areas. Sometimes they still do.
So neighborhoods were put in harm's way from the start.
In many cases, yes. And this raises an important question. How do you fix that now? How do you balance growth with making communities safer when these patterns are already set?
It's a huge challenge. And maybe looking back helps understand the scale. Here's where it gets really interesting. The history of major floods in Texas is just staggering. What's a major one that stands out early on?
Well, the sources highlight the Central Texas flood of 1921. It's one of the deadliest on record for the state. Over 200 people died. Think about this. 40 inches of rain fell in less than 36 hours.
40 inches! That's hard to even picture.
Yeah. The town of Taylor, Texas was basically underwater. It's a stark reminder of how powerful these events can be, even a century back.
Unbelievable. Okay,
Yeah.
fast forward a bit. Tropical storm Allison in 2001. That one hit Houston hard, right?
Allison is a really interesting case. It wasn't about wind speed so much. If we connect this to the bigger picture, Allison stalled. It just sat over Houston and rained. And rained.
How much rain are we talking?
Over 40 inches in some spots. The damage was immense, around $9 billion back then, one of the costliest tropical storms ever at the time. The big takeaway from Allison was how devastating a slow-moving, rain-heavy storm could be, even if it wasn't a major hurricane category-wise.
That slow motion soaking is brutal. And then probably the name most people remember now, Hurricane Harvey in 2017.
Ah, Harvey. Yeah, perhaps the most infamous. It hit as a Category 4, very powerful winds initially. But again, like Allison, the rainfall was the truly catastrophic part. Over 60 inches in some areas near Houston.
60 inches, that's 5 feet of rain.
It's almost unimaginable. The human cost was terrible. over 100 lives lost.
And the economic damage, just astronomical, over $125 billion. Only Hurricane Katrina cost more.
And it's important to stress, these aren't only hurricane events. Remember the May 2015 floods. That was widespread, historic rainfall across Texas and Oklahoma.
I remember that. Wimberley was hit particularly hard, wasn't it?
Yes, the Blanco River rose something like 30 feet in just a few hours. It was incredibly rapid. Homes were just swept away. Families tragically lost members. It shows how quickly things can turn, even without a named storm driving it.
That brings us closer to today, 2024, even into 2025. The sources say this pattern is continuing, maybe even accelerating.
That seems to be the case. We're seeing increased frequency of flooding even outside the typical hurricane season. People are talking about rain bombs hitting cities like Houston and Dallas.
Rain bombs.
Yeah, it's a term for these incredibly intense localized downpours. Just a massive amount of water in a very short time. They completely overwhelm the drainage systems, cause flash flooding, force evacuations.
The May 2024 floods are a recent example. Whole neighborhoods underwater, disaster declarations. It feels relentless.
It does.
So what does this all mean? Looking at this history, the current situation, let's shift to the impacts, the consequences of all this water.
Well, the immediate human and economic costs are obvious and devastating. Billions in property damage, lost homes, cars, businesses, and the tragic loss of life we've mentioned. But there's also the longer-term trauma, displacement, the stress, especially for kids and older folks. That impact lingers for years.
Absolutely. And beyond the human cost, what about the environment itself? What happens to the landscape?
That's another critical angle. What's fascinating here is the ecological ripple effect. Floods cause massive soil erosion, washing away valuable topsoil. They destroy habitats for wildlife. And maybe most worryingly, they spread pollutants. Oil, chemicals from roads, discharge from factories. It all gets washed into rivers and lakes.
Contaminating waterways.
Exactly. Which affects everything downstream, including potentially drinking water sources. It's a long-term environmental problem.
And the built environment, too. Infrastructure, bridges, roads.
Oh, definitely. Infrastructure takes a huge hit. Bridges can be weakened or destroyed. Roads become impassable, sometimes for long periods. Power lines go down. Sewer systems get damaged or overwhelmed.
Rebuilding all that takes years and billions in aid, right? Federal money, state money.
A massive ongoing expense that touches everyone.
Okay, so the problem is clearly enormous, multifaceted. What's being done? Let's talk solutions, proactive measures, and the future outlook.
There are definitely efforts underway. Cities like Houston, for example, having learned hard lessons, are investing heavily in flood control. If we connect this to the bigger picture, you see projects like building more detention ponds.
Those are designed to hold water back temporarily.
Right. Hold it and release it slowly. Also, creating more green spaces, parks, wetlands that can naturally absorb rainwater. And of course, upgrading existing drainage systems, making pipes bigger, improving flow. It's a huge undertaking.
And are we getting smarter about understanding the risk? Mapping, awareness?
Yes, that's happening too. FEMA and local governments are working on updating flood maps, trying to make them more accurately reflect the real risks today, not just based on historical data that might be outdated. And community awareness is a big piece. Educating residents about their specific risk, helping them develop evacuation plans, knowing what to do.
Knowledge is power in that sense.
It really is.
But what about those planning issues you mentioned earlier? Building in floodplains? Is there movement on policy reform? This raises an important question, and it's a tough one politically and economically. There are definitely louder calls now for smarter urban planning. That means stricter building codes in vulnerable areas. And, crucially, putting real limits on new construction in known floodplains.
That sounds like it would clash with Texas's rapid growth, though.
That's exactly the tension, balancing the need for development for housing with the absolute necessity of building resiliently and safely. It's a major policy challenge.
And looking ahead, the elephant in the room, climate change. What do the experts cited in our sources predict for the future of Texas flooding?
The consensus is pretty clear, unfortunately. Experts warn that climate change is amplifying the problem. Basic physics. Warmer air holds more moisture. That translates into the potential for heavier, more intense rainfall events.
So the rain bombs might become more common.
That's the projection. More frequent, more intense flooding is likely, even with the mitigation efforts being put in place now. The baseline risk is shifting.
So as Texas keeps growing, adding millions more people, this challenge isn't going away.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Balancing that continued growth with sustainable flood mitigation, finding ways to live with water, essentially, That's going to be absolutely critical for Texas's future.
Okay, so wrapping this up, it's clear from our sources that flooding in Texas isn't just bad luck or an occasional storm. It's really woven into the state's geography, its development patterns, and its future is undeniably tied to a changing climate.
Absolutely. And understanding that whole picture, the tragic history, the environmental impacts, the ongoing efforts, the future risks, it's just crucial. Crucial for saving lives, protecting communities, and figuring out how to move forward.
And that leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. Given this relentless growth in Texas and the hard reality of more intense flooding driven by climate change, how do we as individuals, as communities, as a state actually strike that balance? The balance between development, which seems inevitable, and the urgent need for sustainable flood solutions that ensure safety and resilience, not just for us, but for the generations to come. It's a tough question, but one Texas and maybe many of us have to confront.